Well, we're starting out in the greenhouse doing some fertilizing. My transplants have never looked better. The problem is, as these trees leaf out, these things are starting to stretch for the sun, and we're going to give most of them away this weekend. I'll talk more about that later. Now, after I get done here, we're heading outside. We're going to continue our fertilization on some plants that don't look as good as they should. Meet me out there. Well, it's so great to see all the dogwoods blooming this time of the year. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. This is a pink dogwood that came out of the winter struggling, and normally this is not pruning time, but when we have deadwood, and that's what we have here, this branch is dead. When I went to the edges and started snapping, that's what it did. It snapped, it did not bend. So we're going to remove this first before we start fertilizing. And whenever we have a long limb like this, we don't cut right next to the tree here, because when this comes off, it could tear the bark, could affect this little growth here. So we go out about a foot, use a good pruning saw, nice and sharp. And don't saw into the wind, because you'll get the sawdust in your eyes. All right, we'll take that away a little bit. And now we're going to get right in here. So we're leaving about a 1/4 inch. We don't want to leave deadwood on a tree, because that's where pests and diseases can get into the tree. And back in the old days, we used to put some tree goop on these cuts, but we don't do that anymore. Scientists tell us that they heal up better on their own. And we want to make a nice flush cut. And then we'll start with our fertilization. And hopefully bring this tree back so that next year it's going to be filled with pink blooms. There we go. All right, right where we want it. All right, let's fertilize. Well, just like that liquid concentrate grow that I use in the greenhouse, this hollytone comes from a company called Espoma, which has been around forever, since the 30s. Organic fertilizers, which is the best way to go, and hollytone is good for acid-loving plants like dogwoods and azaleas, rhododendrons, all the things I'm going to fertilize today. And always read the back of the bag. Make sure you're using the right amount. You don't want to use too much. The plant can only uptake so much fertilizer. What it doesn't use goes into the river. And so all we're doing is just sprinkling this out at the root zone. It does have an odor, like most fertilizers, but it's going to bring this plant back, and hopefully it'll put buds on here, and as I said, next year be filled with pink blooms, because it has in the past. All right, we will apply a little more at the end of the season, again, according to the application rates. Now, I've got a whole bank of rhododendrons, azaleas that need some help. I'm going to work on that, and I'll meet you in the vegetable garden. We're planting beets. You do like beets, don't you? Well, normally we start beets from seeds, but I found these transplants at Han Nursery, and look at that. There's got to be, I don't know, 100 beets in there, and I have started them before from transplants. All we're going to do is split these up, thin them out, put them in here. They will be a little too tight, but I love the greens, so I will harvest the greens as they come. And this is Detroit Dark Red, which is probably the most famous beet ever. And I think this is a pretty cool way to do it. This is some nice compost that we're planting these in. The first thing to do as soon as we get them planted will be to put some water on them, and oh, I can't wait for beets. Beets out of the garden are just like anything else out of the garden. They are just to die for. It's always important to give root crops a little bit of room so they can form that root on the bottom. Like I said, when these get a little too tight, we'll harvest them if we have to. And you know, beets are really good when they're little too. They transplant so easy when they're little like this, and they'll be happy, especially growing in this compost. You know, this soil is just teeming with life. Everywhere you look, something's crawling around here, whether it's an earthworm or a potato bug, and that's a good thing. That's great to see, this organic soil just teeming with life. You know, remember that 99% of the insects are either good or benign in the garden, and we want them to thrive. They help us garden. All right, I'm gonna get some water on this and we're good to go. We want to really soak them in. When they get established, probably 2 weeks down the road, I'll put a little bit of straw on them to keep the soil evenly moist. Now, this is planting time, and normally I say, well, I don't put my tomatoes in until at least the 3rd week of May. So we're getting close. Look at the weather where you're at. Make sure there's no frost coming, and it's just about time to plant your tender crops. Don't rush it though. If the soil's cold, if it's going to be under 50 degrees, there's no hurry. And stagger your planting. Succession planting is important, especially with tomatoes. That's a good way to beat the early blight and septoria leaf spot. Plant some early in the season and some later in the season, all the way up to July 4th. All right, those are good, off to a good start. I have one more thing to show you in the garden, then we're going to finish up. Well, this time of the year, I'm always asked, what do I do about violets in the lawn? Well, I say, enjoy them. Not only are they beautiful, they are a great pollinator plant, and did you know this? They're edible. It's good. All right, let's finish up. Those are good. Check me out online. That's where you can find lots of other garden stories, blog posts, and videos, but also where you can learn all about the 16th annual Everybody Gardens Doug Oster Plant Swap and Giveaway. This Sunday, 10 a.m. at Sorgel's. Bring your plants, we'll trade them, and I've got 2 amazing Pittsburgh heirloom tomatoes to give you. Absolutely free, 1 per family while they last. Until next week, I've got more to do than you could possibly imagine, but I'm loving this, and I bet you are too. Spring is here. See you next week.